relationship with others, with you, and with the world. All of that is there in the Gospels. And if I am following him, these are the things to which I will give my attention. And these are the things to which I will give my life. This is a very specific command. It's meaningful in my tell us that there is a way through death. There is a way through the grave. There is life beyond death. Jesus said to the disciples in the Gospel of John, "Because I live, you will live also." How would you go about finding your way back to God if it weren't for Jesus, who tells us everything that we know about God? Where would I begin to look to find God if it weren't for Jesus? And how would I find my way through death and through the grave if I were not to follow the only one who's been there and has come back again and bids me to follow him, because he will show me the way through. And if I want to come into the presence of the Father, how would I go about it if I were not to follow Jesus, who tells us that he is ascending to his Father and our Father? Is to follow him his resurrection. I am a lost soul without Jesus Christ.